So, I've managed to reach Mythic while playing almost exclusively blue-white control, as you can see. Um, I've managed to point down 3 lists that made me win most of the time, and my most refined list was this one, blue-white censored field, and I'm going to make a deck tech today on this list. So let's go first with the deck. Let's check it out. So it's exclusively for best of one. The metagame here is quite different from what you can find in best of 3, and it plays quite differently since we don't have an access to the sideboard after the first game. So what we can do is play the one-off of Fire of Wishes in order to gain the versatility of having a sideboard. So let's start first. How is composed the deck? You have to know that in best of 1 there are many decks that are weak to Gravedigger's Cage, so this is the rare that the deck is focused upon. It shuts down Collected Company, Croxa, Cat Oven, Moxus, and Snoop, as well as, I think I'm missing one card, and anything that deals with the graveyard. Ah yes, Lurus, of course. With that on the field you can almost shut down half of the houses in the current metagame, so that's why I run 3. It's almost never a dead draw except against the Mirror and Burn. That's why we are running a one-off of Thirst for Knowledge, so that we can discard the excess Gravedigger's Cage in order to draw some more cards. And well, from experience, 3 is the number you want in best of 1, because this format is so quick that you cannot waste time trying to find your cage. You have to get it in your opening hand or in the first couple of draws, and if we go lower than 3 it won't happen consistently. So this is the first bomb of our deck. Next one, Wrath of God. It's a key card for the control strategy. We need to play board wipes, because creatures nowadays generate values when they enter the battlefield or they die, and usually one-offs like answers like Baffling Ends and Seal Away cannot counter the value that the card already has when it comes into play. So we need to play cards that will deal with the opponent's threats, not one by one but multiple at a time, in order to try to keep a balance in resources spent versus the resources that the opponent has spent against us. So for Wrath of God, really good card. I've added one Settle the Wreckage due to the blue-white deck that runs enchantments. They have a lot of indestructible effects, and or X-proof effects, and Settle the Wreckage can play around that. I also run another Doomscar because in many matchups, having a board wipe is absolutely necessary if you want to come back into the game. So we've got a total of 6 sweepers, and it's the least I would run in the current metagame. There are very few non-creature decks, and we need not only one but usually 2 board wipes in order to really borrow the opponent under our value, and I've often noticed that one isn't enough. Okay, so next up, the 1-for-1 answers. So we've got can I move it more easily? Well, not really. Well, we have creature removal as Baffling Hand and Silhouette. I've decided to play 2 of each because they run a different niche. Baffling Hand is in order to hit blue-white enchantment creatures because they often have vigilance, and it's something that Silhouette cannot hit. And I've run Silhouette because I play Teferi as my main houser, and when you +1 with Teferi you untap 2 lands, and it allows you to play the Silhouette in response to a creature attacking your Teferi, and it also allows you to play answers end of turn so that you don't need to spend your mana during your turn, and as a result you can keep mana in order to play counter spells during your opponent's turn, and it adds you more certainty to your gameplay, and it prevents you to guess if the opponent has a threat or not that you need to counter. This way you can make your choice end of turn if they didn't play a threat early on. Okay, so this was the creature removal. We also have a cast out as a catch-all answer. It can be cycled early on to find the Gravedigger cage if needed. It can also be cycled against blue-white control, which I think you should do, because they will eventually be able to get rid of your cast out, and getting rid of the cast out later in the game can be your death sentence against the mirror. So I like this versatility that you have by cycling the card. It's quite good, and also it can be played at instant speed thanks to flash, and it's something that I really value, not to commit mana during my turn, but use it at the end of the opponent's turn. It grants you a lot of safety, and it allows you, like I said before, not to have to guess. And on the other hand, it makes your opponent guess what's going to come. Do you have a counter spell? Do you have a flash removal? Do you have a flash anti-planeswalker, for example? Do you have only a card draw? If you don't commit during your turn, they have no way of knowing what you have in hand, and I think it's a really great value. Sorry if you can hear the cars going around, but it's a hot day for once in a while, so I'm keeping the windows open. Alright, next in the game we have counter spells. It's the bread and butter of our defensive strategy. It's a key card to have against control strategies, so you need to have a decent amount. It's also an indispensable card against ramp up strategies such as mono-green Planeswalkers, Sultai Ultimatum, such as what's it called, mono-brown, like Tron-ish archetype. So for that you need a high density of counterspell. So I've decided to run 4 Absorb. I've chose Absorb because of the incremental life gain, or the incidental life gain, whatever you want to call it. It's really important because there are a lot of aggressive decks in the metagame, and when I say a lot, it's a lot. There's mono blue, there's blue-white auras, there's green elves, there's blue angel, no, not blue, white angels, I mean. There's blue tempo, there's green-red hasty creatures Gruul, and there still are some more in the metagame, so you need some life gain, and Absorb is a really good way to get those life points back in some way. I also run a Thread Coming because I think the Foretell is more valuable than the cycling that you can get from the other one. The Foretell allows you to protect yourself against third cities that are really common in the current metagame. So I like this one. I prefer this one instead of the cycling, and I find it really rare that I would want to cycle a hard counterspell with no special requirements to counter the spell. To the Vince Vetoes, this is mostly due to the Tibalt's Trickery card in the metagame, the plenty of collected companies, the occasional mirror matchup, and it's more of a flex card. I wouldn't go below 1 copy of it. I've decided to run 2 because I like the comfort of having an uncontrollable counter spell, and it's quite cheap, so I have found room to fit this one in, and I'm usually not disappointed in it. It's really against goblins that you have no use of it, but other than that, it always find a use one way or another. It's also really good against Embocleave, so it's not to be underestimated. Also good against Collected Company, and you can use it with the +1 of Teferi on turn 5 to protect it against a removal such as Bloodsheath Thirst, I think it's called. Lastly, in our counterspell package, we have Censor. I was first not really sure I wanted to run it in best of 1. It's not really, it's too soon of an answer. We'd rather have wider answers in best of 1 because usually 1-for-1s aren't enough. But due to Tibalt's Trickery, it's really good to have as a defensive option, especially if you are on the play, and the game that you are on the draw, you can use it in order to get back some tempo against an opponent that is going like turn 1 Lanoir, turn 2 3-drop into snowballing into something else. You can use the Censor to disturb that strategy. So it's not a must-have card, I'd say. At least not in best of 1. Best of 3, I think it's really good, but best of 1, not that much. but in the current metagame I think we can use it, and especially with the cycling ability, it still manages to find its use. Next, we need value. In best of 1 you don't need as much value than in best of 3. There are many aggro decks that run an all-out strategy, and if you manage to disturb their plans, they will most of the time concede before you run out of cards in the first place. But for the more grindy matchups, you need ways to fill your hand back again. So we've got our Thirst for Knowledge in order to discard the Gravedigger's Cage, like we've said before. We also have the Teferi that draws us one additional card a turn, which is also our game ender. And we have the Maze Mind Tome. This one is one of my favorites. I wouldn't run more than 2s because you only need 1 in order to gain the enough value, at least the value that you want. If you run more, you can get stuck with multiple ones in hand and not have enough mana to fully utilize the draw ability of the card, which you usually want to use. Against aggro decks, if you don't have the Sweeper in hand, or against graveyard decks, if you don't have the Gravedigger's Cage in hand, you can use the Maze Mind Tome as a 4-time scry in order to get to these answers. And I don't even recall the number of games that Maze Mind Tome managed to give me the answer I needed in this specific situation, thanks to the scry ability. And at the 4th fuse we get 4 life, which is incredibly good. You want this life gain in order to counterbalance the incremental damage that you get through the game, especially due to the density of aggro matchups that you have. So Absorb and Maze Mind Tomes are our best ways of getting our lives back again. We also have a Seagate Restoration as a one-off in the deck in order to, whenever you find an opening, really borrow your opponent with a hand now full of cards. It's really a win more card, but it also manages to sometimes find you out of difficult situations. So, well, we don't really run that many card draw in the deck, so I think a one-off of this one is not really necessary, but it's a good addition, I'd say. If you're not comfortable with running a card that isn't a basic land or has the basic tag in its name, well, you can switch it up for something more conventional, but this card has made me more good than harm overall, I'd say. Alright, Fire of Wishes, it will also grant us the value and the card advantage that we need, but I'll come to it in a little bit. I just want to talk about the authority of the consoles first. It's the last addition I've made in the deck. I tried to run 2 of these, but I thought that it was a bit overkill. 1 is enough. It's not always useful, but when it is, it really is. So I think running it as a one-off is quite fine. It allowed me to not die against a Moxus once. It nerfs Krenko's Krenko ability quite a lot. Maybe it grants you the additional turn that you need to play your board wipe without not having a flurry of hasty threats going your way. It also greatly improved the mid-game against Gruul and against Mono-Red as well, so it's really not a bad card. And if you have trouble finding your cage against the giant Cat-Oven deck, the authority of the consoles nullifies the enter the battlefield ability of the cat, so it's always something that is good to remind of. And that's a good overall of the main deck. So let's check the lands real bit. Irrigated farmlands, we run 25 lands total, no, 27 lands total, so that's quite a lot, but it's really necessary. If you miss one land drop, you're almost always dead in best of one, so you need to get to your 5th, to your 5th, to your 7th land drop consistently, or else you won't be able to play a Wrath and hold a counterspell after that in order to prevent your opponent from rebuilding back again, and you need to carve out. If you don't, you die. So 27 lands minimum. Well, I would see myself going down to 26, but I would never go under it. And you also have to keep in mind that in best of one there is an algorithm that gives you a hand with a some kind of pattern that they would check 3 hands and they would give you one that has the best mana to spares equilibrium, if I can say this word, for like of a better one. And if you run fewer lands, it can really mess you up and give you always 2 landers in your opening hands, and it's quite it's not enough for blue-hand control. You would want preferably a starting hand with 3 and not 2, or else you are going for a bad ride. We are playing Irrigated Farmland due to the cycling ability, so if we happen to flood out in the mid to late game, we can always cycle it. Usually the untapped ability isn't quite detrimental because all of the other cards in the deck enter the battlefield untapped under the right conditions, so you can afford to run 3 of those. We can also run Castle Venturesses. Those ones are quite okay. They aren't the most important ones, but against control matchups, those are the ones that will allow you to always hit your land drops and to dig deeper in order to fetch your corner spares and to scry the unnecessary creature removers away. So it's mostly against the blue-white mirror or the ultimatum matchup. Castle Ardenvale, it's our secondary win condition, I guess. I'd say our first one is Teferi, then our third is Castle Ardenvale, and our fourth is Fae of Wishes. It's a really important card. 3, I find it is the right number, and you should not hesitate against control matchup to really pressure the opponent with a constant flow of 1/1s, thanks to this card. Latest addition to the deck is a Field of Ruin, mostly here to get rid of the manlands, the new one especially, and it's also a good card against the mirror matchup in order to destroy the Castle Ardenvale. It's a bit awkward with Absorb because it will prevent you from playing it on turn 3 if you run a Field of Ruins, but the number of times it happens is not really consequential enough in order to justify removing one of these two cards in your deck. I think it happened once between all the games I've made with this deck and similar ones on the side. And last but not least, we'll see our sideboard. We have a Fae of Wishes, and it's a really important card because you don't have access to a sideboard in best of 1, and there are quite a lot of really fringe decks that are here and about in the ladder, and sometimes you need those really weird answers in order to fight back against them, and one slot in a control deck is really not a big loss if it's to get a full sideboard at your disposal in addition to that. So let's see. I've got a Pact of Negation. It's usually here against combo decks in order to protect yourself even more. You have Dovin's Veto. It's most importantly good against the control matchup. The Tormod script, I think it's going to be the next one that I will get rid of. I've never found a really good use of it, so I think I'll toss this one, and I think you can feel free to get rid of it as well. Gravedigger's Cage to get the fourth one. Sometimes you get the Fae of Wishes early, but no cage. In that case, you play Granted and you fetch this one, and it's gonna be really good afterward, usually. Sorcerer's Spyglass, it's against a manland or a planeswalker. Don't forget you can name lands with this card. So if you have a Crawling Barrens or a Faceless Heaven, I think it's called, or Shambling Things, all those annoying cards, you can answer them with the Sorcerer's Spyglass, and I might want to get rid of the Tormod script to add one more of those. Timely Reinforcement, an awesome card. It gives you the time back to come back into the game, or this little edge in order to stabilize against most red or red-green decks. I used to play one main board instead of Authority of the consoles, but Authority has treated me well so far, so I don't think so. I don't know if I'll commit back to the Timely Reinforcements yet. Gideon's Intervention, it's also a card like the Tormod script that I didn't that I haven't found a use of it yet. I was initially thinking about naming cards like Hugin, Ultimatum, things like that with it, but usually fetching your Dovin's Veto is enough, so it can be a card that you can get rid of. On the other hand, Excellence Binding is really good. When there is a threat in the game that you cannot answer, you can go fetch this one and prevent the opponent from playing any other copy of it. So it's really good against Embercleave, for example, Nissa, Yugin. It's really good against Questing Beasts and the kind of threats that are really unforgiving when they come into the battlefield the turn they do it. So really like this one as a catch-up mechanic. Shadow of the Sky could be a Doomscar. I'd rather pay the discounts if I fetch it from the sideboard. If I do, it's that I am in a desperate situation and I'd rather have something cheaper that I can use next turn, other than something that I might be lacking 1 mana and be stuck with it. Into the story, quite a good one. It's a cheap way of coming back in the game if you ever run out of resources, which could happen. We only run a few card draw engines, so the Into the Story has come quite often in use against the grandeur matchups, and it's not really dangerous to commit to it. Like, playing a Sphinx's Revelation will let you tap out, and you're quite vulnerable to counterspell. If you wait for the next turn, however, you can play Into this Story for 4 mana and perhaps protect it with your own counterspell. Yugin, it's okay-ish. We run a lot of permanents that die to the minus of Yugin, but in some games just the +2 is enough in order to win the game. I might switch it sometimes, or perhaps not Yugin, but let's say the Gideon's Innovation for a Shark Typhoon, for example. But well, our primary finisher in the sideboard isn't Yugin, but it's Finally of Glory. You usually want to fetch it when you have 12 mana in the game, so that you can pay X equal 10. And with that, next turn, if your opponent doesn't have a board wipe, which most opponents don't due to the current metagame, well, they will just dead to the swing back. So it's the primary kill your opponent card from the sideboard. Guillotine Intervention is quite good. It can deal with annoying artifacts, especially against the mono brown deck that runs Gravediggers, not Gravediggers Cage, Sorcerer's Spyglass. Like, often they will run Sorcerer's Spyglass to name our Teferi, and we'll usually use our castouts in order to deal with their planeswalkers. Well, we can find a Guillotine Intervention in order to get rid of those artifacts, and it can also give us a lot of life points. It's a bit redundant with what's it called, timely reinforcements, but if you have a lot of mana available at that time, it might be more interesting to pick this one. Finally, of Revelation, it's a nice I'll start the game again with a huge hand. It's also a way to prevent from decking if the game goes really long, if you have 12 mana available. So if, let's say, your 3 Teferis are down and you are near from decking yourself, you can use Finally of Revelation to shuffle your graveyard into your library and draw 10 new cards. It happened more often than you would expect, and it's definitely one of those cards that I would keep in the sideboard above most of the other cards. Lastly, Masked Manipulation. Quite a good card, I really love it. It's most of the time it's in order to steal one of our opponent's planeswalker, especially when they are near what's it called, ultimating, and if you can catch the opponent's planeswalker once they get to their final loyalty corner, you can time it in order to gain the emblem that the opponent has worked so hard from getting, and it's a really satisfying move to pull, and it's nonetheless really strong if you just steal one or two creatures or planeswalkers later on in the game. So that's pretty much about it. Now let's speak about cards that I didn't include in the deck. The most striking card that isn't here is of course Shark Typhoon. So why? Well, best of one is way too fast for Shark Typhoon. It's usually a 2 mana cycle and you die the turn after, so it's not worth it. Decks that run Shark Typhoon against us usually don't win either. We have answers like Settle the Wreckage and Seal Away to fight against the cycled shark, and we can get rid of it with Cast Out, the -3 of Teferi, so it's not really a huge deal in the mirror, as you quite unexpectedly, and against the density of really straightforward aggro decks, if you cycle in order to play a shark as a way to ambush or to chump block, you usually get your shark removed in the process, because you don't run any other creature in your deck. So the opponent will have at least 1 or 2 removals in their hands, and they will probably run you over on the next few turns, because you've spent 1 turn doing absolutely nothing. And there are also a lot of Claim the Firstborn in the metagame, and let's say you cycle a big shark, opponent can steal it and attack you on the air with it, and it can really be game ending for you, because usually against those decks your life total is really quickly worn off or worn down. I don't know how you say it, but well, okay. And that is mainly the reasons why I'd rather not run it, and you can see it in my percentage of win rate. This is the deck where I usually run Shark Typhoons, and it really doesn't work really well due to the aggressiveness of the metagame, and I don't think I've kept the other ones due to their inherent quickness. The card really doesn't work in best of one. It's really you'd rather have something else, and in my case it's Fire of Wishes and what's it called, Maze Mind Tome. They usually are good enough in order to win you the game on their own, and you can let the other houses like Teferi and what's it called, Castle Ardenvale do the job, and usually there's no issue against the mirror as well. Let's see what other card didn't fit in the list. Well, a playset of Baffling Ends I'd rather run 2 and get the versatility of running a few Siloways as well, because like I said before, it can catch up sharks as well, which is kind of a big deal, and it can also catch bigger creatures that are above 3 CMC. And in the end, what do I have to add? The deck is really good overall. It's overall around 65-ish win rate, 68, 65, 62 as you've seen. I've also run a version with what's it called, Skyclave Apparition, but I don't think it's that good anymore in the current metagame. So I would give you that advice, stick out to cast out for now, and if the metagame becomes too fast and too low to the ground, shift back again to Skyclave Apparition. So your good matchups are obviously everything that is heavily creature based, because you play so many sweepers and answers to the small creatures. So it's really good against mono red, against white angels. It's really good against them. I think it's my best matchup. I think I lost to them only once, and since they are everywhere in the metagame, you usually can chain win quite a lot thanks to the frequency that you fade them. And it's also really good against what's it called, Giant Food, because they don't play as many non-permanent answers like they used to do before. Now they play with 4 Trail of Crumbs, so their main answers are sagas or creatures, which we can deal with easily. We're also quite good against elves. Depends if they are on the draw or on the play. We can be one turn slower, but usually it's a positive matchup. We are kind of good against Gruul as well. It's I'd say above average, but not more than that. It's still a deck that can get you out of nowhere due to the density of hasty creatures that they run. We are also quite good against mono red, extremely good against goblins due to Gravedigger's Cage, the density of board wipes and the many counter spells that they run. After that they only play a few 1/1s, and yeah, they can't keep up with our own value. Bad matchups are usually other control decks. It's not really some bad matchups, but it's just slightly below average, I'd say. Average or below average. Like blue-white, we have so many creature hate that yeah, it's quite good to fight against them. All of those are dead cards, and yeah, it only leaves you this one to fight up against them. It's so it's only half of the deck that is viable, and yeah, it's not good enough. But like you've seen in my channel, if you play smart, you can still manage to beat them. Worst matchup are tempo decks like Blue Flash or Blue Black Rogues. Those ones, if you are not on the play, you can almost give up on the spot. It's really rare that you can win one game against them, and you are quite bad against Planeswalkers decks. So all the decks that are completely unaffected to all these cards and that play 4 Nisas, 4 Karns, 4 Yugins and things like that, and those you struggle against. So that's still a deck that managed to send me to Mythic once again, from Gold to Mythic, and well, it served me well. I still believe in the power of blue-white control in a best of one, and in order to be successful with it, you need to know your deck and to know your opponent and the key spells to counter or remove, and not use all your resources blindly. It's a really game of you have to guess and anticipate the others, and you just let the smaller things go through, and you play in your big swing a few steps ahead, and usually when you do that, your win rate will start to go up quite a lot, and you'll get to Mythic in best of one. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening to this this deck tech. It's sorry again for the awkwardness. It's not my native language, so I'm still a bit rough around the edges with it. Hopefully I'm still intelligible enough for you, and if you have any question, please let me know in the comments, and I'll be glad to answer them for you. Alright, see you on the next one.